Hi, how's it in the name of Christ? How you doing? It's your girl Karabo. Karabo. I hope you're good. I hope you're peachy. I hope you're stellar. And I hope you're in a neat little bunch. If you're not, welcome to the party. That's just the story of my life. Let me just put some caveats out there. Kindly look out for my captions. They're not always accurate. They sometimes use a small g for God, not very reverential. They sometimes are misspelled altogether, or it's the wrong word altogether. I don't have incentive right now or energy to change them up, to adjust them, because I'm not currently getting viewed, and that's something that we are going to be talking about, touching on it somewhere along the way in today's message. Okay, right, or secondly, I'm very potentially wearing application makeup. If I am, you will know. If I'm not, you'll also know. It bounces off my face, so I'm not shape-shifting. It's an amp. And then I have a segment, and indeed, today we ought incorporate the segment of ours with oomph and impetus more so than other days, because I'm really talking to that particular issue. But I want to get it out the way because really my heart is flat and I just want to get this like completely just done with. Intention was to blush my cheeks to show you that when you prick me, I bleed. When you punch me, I say ouch. When you roll over me with a steamroller, I will probably die because I'm human. But people are treating me like trash. So it's essentially an empathy segment. And today I prospered to get it in really quickly. Other days it takes a minute. Anyway, let's get to the point. Today's the 4th of, it's April, but May. It's the 4th of May. Goodness, of course not April. It's the 4th of May, 2024. And it's actually the 4th of May. I'm not yet hopped over to the next day because it's a Saturday and I tend to do a lot less on Saturday, so I can actually come here earlier. Like I don't exercise on weekends, stuff like that, so that's a thing. Anyway, so just so you can gauge your bearings as to where it is that we find ourselves on the day that I do this video, it is imperative for me to highlight the date. And I'm wearing this wig, this big fat chunky wig, because I'm covering a hair treatment on my head. I need to actually bring down my braids. Y'all know that. My protective style. My mini twists. Not twists, but braids. I need to bring them down. But I first had to wash my hair, and it's like moisturized and it's getting a treatment now, so I'll probably get to it tomorrow, and I really hope I get to it tomorrow. If not, it's okay, really. We've got all week to just keep doing one little patch of the head of mini braids per day. It's alright, I'm not going anywhere, but it would be ideal if I could just get it all in one sitting. Now that we've spoken about non-essentials and irrelevant things, we can then just head straight to the point. Okay? Alright, do you guys know why I watch so much American gospel or Western gospel? Let's just say Western, because some of the people that I observe are from the United Kingdom. Do you know why the majority of my doctrine is Western? I will tell you why. God is the one that raises up in the admonition of himself. He's the one that chooses. No one can choose God. We are drawn to the Son by the Father, and then no one can pluck us out of his hand once that's been concluded. The Lord, when he is doing a particular work in a human being, then raises him up ever so uniquely, individually, that this individual might prosper to do what work that the Lord will do in them to finish it. God is the one that fashions for us good works in advance that we might walk in them. Yes, so when you are living in a hotbed of heresy, but God has a job for you, he will miraculously lead you to all truth. It's written in his word that the Holy Spirit guides us into all truth. He's the one that teaches us appropriately. I am South African. I was raised largely irreligiously. However, there were religious facets to my upbringing, in the sense that I attended religious schools in the very formative years of my upbringing, Catholic in particular. To be exact, South African schools, however, government schools at the time that I was growing up, I don't know if that's ever since then changed, were Christian. It was just a default. We used to sing hymns and pray in the name of Jesus, the Our Father, every single morning, even in government schools. But the first few schools that I went to, the first school I ever went to was public, and the Our Father was a thing. We used to sing it in assembly, etc. So it was a Christian school. However, I then moved from Dumelang in Soweto to St. Matthew's, which was a Catholic school, also in Soweto, in Rockville. Okay, briefly, I was there, and then I moved to Mayfair Convent. Also, I was there for like 1 or 2 years, or 2 or 3 years at Mayfair Convent, and it was convent. that hints that it was a Catholic school. In grade 5, that would be standard 3. At the time, we used to call school standards, right? Grade standards. That's when I moved permanently to government schools, and there was never any religious heaviness in the schools that I was brought in. And even in the government schools, even though they were a lot more unruly, the kids there nonetheless was still a gospel theme. We sang hymns in assembly. That's why I know a lot of the hymns off by heart. In government and private, in both government I.E. public schools and private, the country generally just was all about Christianity. Alright, so that's all the religion I got in. Essentially, it's like I was taken to school to be taught somewhat a little bit about Jesus. But at home, no such thing. So I guess I was raised up in some kind of religiousness by the schooling system. But then when I moved over to a government school in grade 5, it was pretty much over. My walk with God. I didn't really have a serious walk with God, but because children are so impressionable and so they're so easy to teach, I took Catholicism very seriously as a child because I was in Catholic schools. When I was at St. Matthew's, I took it seriously. We used to go to mass and all that jazz, pray the rosary, pray the Our Father. I then took it seriously too at Mayfair Convent, so I was a holy-ish kid. But of course, with loads of heresy therein, due to Catholicism, we all know that there's just massive heresies in there. But you know, let's not throw out the baby with the bathwater. I was a well-regulated child as a result of these schools. And then all hell, to say the least, broke loose when I went to a government school, where it is that the only religion that we got was just saying the Our Father every morning before class commenced. And in assembly, on the days we had assembly, we would then sing hymns. That was all that there was, but there was no actual teaching, no instruction on God, no religious studies class, no aftercare where you were taught godliness. Like, it was a whole thing in the Catholic schools. I was never in a Christian school. It was a whole thing where it is that being taught up in godliness was a total thing. We got rebuked by teachers a lot using the Bible when I was in those Catholic schools. So it really went a long way to discipline general desires in me as a kid. It therefore stuck with me. When I got older then, moving on to the Winchester Ridge Primary School was the last primary I was ever at. Then moving on to Sir John Adamson, I maintained a sense of God in that I was not atheist. I never could be. There was always a fear of God in me. Not a fear of God, because really that's the beginning of wisdom. I was not saved, but I had a trepidation about getting on the bad side of God just in case he exists. So I've never, by the amazing grace of God, ever let go of the existence of God. I've always just believed, but that's how most people are on the earth. They're theistic, albeit not quite understanding what is the way to deity, to the one true God. Yeah, most of the world believes in God, but most of the world does not believe in the right way. So unfortunately, most of the world still goes to hell. Anyway, righto, so I was just like the rest of the world, the most of the world, and I believed in God, but I wasn't saved, not even in the slightest. Yeah, so the world just kind of tossed me to and from with its ebbs and its flows. And that was that. I was living a worldly lifestyle. I was just a carnal kid. Yeah, just a regular child growing up in a country that's not saved. I wasn't a wayward kid. I wasn't terribly afflicting to teachers or my parents or whatever. I was not a bad child by the standards of this world. But I certainly was not a great girl, according to the only one in whose eyes that really matters, God, right? I was what this world called a relatively moral woman. Moral girl. I was moral. Yeah. And so by the standards of this world, I was what the world would call a good girl. Yeah, the world. Let's just put that out there. I was never like Sia, swinging on a chandelier, because let's just paint the town red and be as dastardly as we possibly can. I never ever was that horrible teenager, that hard kid to handle, that impossible human that doesn't want school. I was never that girl. I was never. And I do believe that the biggest reason why that was the case was because I always had some kind of thing just at the back of my brain chilling somewhere that God exists. And I remembered all that religiosity, whatever the word might be, okay, of my former years in the Catholic schools. It always just stuck with me, so I maintained a good girl persona. That's pretty much it, okay? So I was always the innocent girl. If at all I was hanging with bad girls, I was always the like, but why are you with this crowd? Are they gonna peer pressure you? Karabo, you're hanging out with the bad people. When I started smoking cigarettes, everybody was like, this thing does not suit you. It's your cousin. You've been influenced like proper. According to many people, I could do no wrong, and when I was doing wrong, it would look at everybody else on some, what have you done to this poor child? You are influencing this child. I just always had a good girl image to a point where everybody would blame everybody else whenever I did something strange. That was unfortunate, but anyway, whatever, thank God. I was rescued from a self-righteousness somewhere along the way. At the age of 26 and a half, I came to Christ. But I'm trying to help you understand that a person with my kind of self-righteousness, frankly, especially with the crew that I used to hang out with in the persons of my cousin in particular, right? My girls from high school were better in terms of their morality, and so too were my varsity crew better, right? But my cousin was just wayward, and like in the worst way, and she was often blamed for my indiscretions every so often when I performed them, right? Yeah, that gave me a self-righteousness to a certain extent. It always made me feel like I'm the good girl, and everybody's always going to look at me like the sweet Gonyane. It became my brand. It thoroughly became my brand for me to be the innocent girl that every so often hangs out with bad crowds. Even when I started dating my ex-boyfriend of 5 years, yeah, because he was also raised in the south of Johannesburg. He went to a school in the south of Johannesburg too. We crossed paths all throughout our upbringing with more or less the same people. He was older than me by 4 years, so the people that he was acquainted to were more acquainted with my sister, my older sister, than with me. I was a kid when he was thriving and doing whatever he was doing in high school. I was in grade 8, he was in matric, and we never crossed paths in school. We only met much later, right? And he was, I guess, one of those very hectic boys all over the show, all over Johannesburg, on the come up. And he was known by my sister's squad. He was known by my older sister's general crew. If at all, people would recognize anybody out of his crew of friends. They wouldn't recognize me. They would recognize my older sister. And that was like a whole thing in our relationship. So I remember this one time we went to this memorial service of one of his boys that had passed away in a motorcycle accident. And one of the guys there looked at me and was like, you look familiar. Oh, who are you? Like, you look familiar. And I was like, I'm sorry, I don't know. I don't recognize you. And then ultimately he was like, got it. You are your sister's sister. He basically recognized me as being my sister's baby sister. Now, the only time that boys would have seen me in my sister's crew is if they were somewhere where it is that we were all together. And there's one time in history that I can recall where it is that my sister's guy friends, a whole bunch of them, and girlfriends were in one sitting and they got to see me on some Hello Nana. It was at some big fat bash party thing that was thrown for my sister when she was leaving for Italy, because she studied overseas type thing, yeah, at my house. And we were there, and I was like the little sister of the girl whose party it was. It was also my birthday on that day, so it was like a combined event, but I was much younger and I had fewer people that were there, so essentially it's like my sister took over that whole celebration. It was okay, I didn't care really. It was a farewell party for her, and so a lot of her boys in the hood that knew her recognized me as that her kid sister from that day. Plus there was quite a few of them that would have recognized me from high school, but like I said, if they were in my school. I was never all over the south of Johannesburg. I didn't know kids from other high schools. I was not forward. I was not all over the show. So even if I studied in the south of Joburg, really the only people that would know me are the ones that went to my high school. So the ones that were in my high school would recognize me. Even though they were in matric would be a final grade 12, the final year of high school. They were in matric and I was in grade 8. So they would recognize me as, oh, that's older sister's younger sister. And then they got out of school, so they would recognize me later on. So it turns out that one of the guys recognized me from back in the day. I don't know if he went to my high school or if he saw me at that party or whatnot at my house. It was at home. That's where he would have seen a 13, 14-year-old girl, right? He then looked at my ex he looked at me at this memorial and he was like, where do I know you from? I was like, I can't tell you. And then ultimately he's like, woo, I remember you. You're my sister's younger sister, right? Very well. I was like, oh yeah, no, yes, I'm totally her sister by all means. Indeed. So you do recognize me. You're not just passing a line over here. And then he looked at my boyfriend. Of course, I was accompanying my boyfriend, who was going to the memorial service of his late friend. The late friend of which I did not know personally, but I was there to support my boyfriend. Okay. He then looks at my boyfriend, who had introduced me to him as, this is Karabo, my girlfriend. And then he's like, I recognize you. And then he's like, you're this chick's sister. He then looked at my boyfriend and he's like, hi, Ndota. Hi. This is chicken murder. This is child abuse. This girl is innocent. She does not deserve to be with a guy like you. I was low-key flushed and embarrassed for my ex-boyfriend. He laughed it off on some whatever, man, like, don't be speaking smack here, but essentially my ex was a chicken murder, by the way, in this country is a term utilized for dating somebody that is much too young for you. I was 22 when my ex was 26. When you get to your 20s, that gap is not so gargantuan. But anyway, this guy saw me as this little child that must always be kept in a fragile little glass container, and just left in a corner to just, enjoy the sun, but don't hurt it. And when he learned that I was dating my ex, he flat out just like protested, like right there on some, this is chicken murder. And this here is the destruction of a pure innocent girl. Like, what are you doing? I was not surprised at that guy's sentiment, because I have in my life heard that a lot of times with either chicks I was hanging out with or guys that I was dating, that this is chicken murder. What are you doing with such a sweet girl? You're gonna ruin her. You're gonna destroy her. Maybe it's because I was the quiet, shy type, like Squire for Hire. I don't know. I was quiet. I was shy. I struggled to be boisterous and like personality coming out and all that jazz as a kid. So that might be part of the reason. But I was just, I don't know. There's something I gave off that made everybody feel as if though the whole world is destroying my purity and I should save myself from the world that is destroying my purity. That's just a brand I carried all my life, and there was nothing that could ever tarnish it, in the sense that there's nothing I could ever do that would ever blame me. Nobody blamed me for stuff that happened. It was always everybody's influence. That's how the world consumed me. I was always just received as innocent, even when I was guilty, and I prided myself in that. I really did. Somewhere along the way, like I said, it became a brand. It became a brand where it is that I knew that nobody was going to blame me. And not that I deliberately put myself in harm's way, that nobody would blame me ultimately. However, it just happened. I can't even explain why it happened. It just did. It became my brand. Okay. Very well. So because of me being viewed like that, pretty much from since I was a teenager kid, like, yeah, all the way into my 20s, I was always just viewed as the person that can do no wrong, and when you do wrong, who made her do it? That's how it was. I developed a self-righteousness, like I said, where it is that I just wore it as a crown, like I'm a good girl, yeah, and it is what it is. And I liked that I was looked at as such because something deep down inside me knew that guys like good girls, even though they pretend to like savages. That it is always the good girls that get the ring, the savages get taken to the club. And I saw myself as this woman that would ultimately marry well, and be, taken seriously, made an honest woman out of, because I was the good girl. I was the dude that ain't nobody's mom ever gonna give grief. I was gonna be the girl that ain't nobody's boy ever gonna be like, but what are you doing with this chick? I don't like her. And indeed, it was true. I was generally looked at as good for whoever I was with, like every single time. Yeah. So I was, of course, inevitably, according to me anyway, gonna marry young, and I was going to be loved by my in-laws. I was going to be good in that area. But then I continued to date that dude for a couple more years. He wasted my time. Anyway, whatever. And did not make an honest woman out of me, because according to his boy, this is chicken murder. Like, what are you doing with this innocent woman? Yeah, bad dudes will take innocent girls and just string them along. And that's exactly what that dude did for like a whole chunky half a decade of my life. Thankfully, however, I got out of there through Jesus Christ. He was bad for me. Whatever speculations his boys made were accurate. My own gut feeling in the beginning was accurate. Those who sirened the alarm at my brutal rebuff were right. And if it was not for redemption in Jesus Christ, I very potentially might have ended up married to a dude that would have strung me along maybe 3 more years and then decided to marry, or whatever. I got saved out of that relationship. He was busy with me, with sorcery somewhere along the way. He was controlling me. And I do believe that the reason why he also tarried over to the darkness was because of that phenomenon, that whole thing where everybody was like, she's too good for him, you're too good for him, you are committing chicken murder, this is that, like this chick, like she's too, like, yeah, what are you doing with a woman like this? All that kind of talk in his ear made him decide that I'm not gonna go anywhere, that I am basically just kind of going to be kept in a bunch, held hostage in a relationship until he has gotten his act together and made a decision that he's going to marry me or whatever. He knew that there was sentiment about him not being right for me, and he knew that I also, as I was getting older, was dissatisfied very richly in the relationship. And I kept on making it clear that, hello, like, get your act together. When is this, how's this gonna end? Like, really? And he never did. But I'm not laboring this whole video. I'm not even doing it really to speak about that relationship. It's another topic altogether that I'm ultimately going to lend towards, but the context is important. Okay, yeah, the self-righteousness that I wore was largely inspired by the way people treated me. They imagined me a little barbecue that can't do anything wrong, that everybody influences negatively, and that needs to be rescued from bad people. That created a self-righteousness in me. And secondly, I had defiled religion in my core as the only doctrine that I didn't even so much entirely understand, but it's the only one I had. The religion of Catholicism. And whenever people asked me what I believe in, if I had to fill out on a banking application form what my religion was, because banks ask for your religion, at least they used to back in the day. Don't know if that's changed because everybody's all about their human rights now. And how does it want to be, bothered by all these questions? Yeah, I would say Catholicism. I would say that I'm Roman Catholic, okay? Because that's just what was the only religion that I had. It was the only religion that I was introduced to in schools. Not even so much by family. My mom was not religious. She didn't take me to church when she was still living in her mother's house. So my mother ended up having to move back home to my grandmother's house, she and my dad, because they went through a rough patch at some point. During that time, my grandmother would drag us to the Methodist church down the road, but that didn't last very long because we ultimately moved out of my grandmother's house. So the largest majority of my upbringing really was unchurched by family, but churched by the schooling system. Okay, and so I called myself Catholic for those reasons. Whenever my mom would go to church, it would always be a Christian church, never a Catholic church. My aunt was the one that was Catholic, but what I was raised under to understand was Catholicism, because I went to schools of that nature and they hammered down that religion into my core. Okay, yeah, very well. So I always had a sense of God. I always had a sense of understanding that I have, believe it or not, like inordinate favor. I don't know whether this was because of the self-righteousness, but I always had a sense that literally, I know it's blasphemous to say this, but I was lost, so I get to confess it, okay? That God liked me more. Like, I thoroughly imagined at the time that there was something about me. I felt special, and I felt like God liked me more than everybody else. Not so much everybody else, but than the regular man on the street. I felt like there was something different about me, that I was more loftily regarded by God than everybody else, to a point where I did not imagine, once I started to thrive in life later on, like, when I was working and everything, that I could ever be met with a rough patch. It was just sitting, chilling in my members, a belief that I'm gonna become wealthy and that I am never going to be met with a stumbling block, at least materially. I will always be financially strong, and I will always get strange opportunities that don't generally get awarded to the regular man or woman on the street. I had that belief since I was in school, and the reason why I believed that was because It was inspired by real life events, by actual eventualities. I was always awarded inordinate favor across whatever ecosystems I would find myself in. People always looked at me in a particular, like I would happen into a situation and find myself being awarded a status I didn't quite anticipate would be mine in that place, and I would be surprised. And I started to notice that these small little lucks, I guess when you are in the world you would call it luck, right? All this luck that I had on the come up, I concluded it obviously was God. Now, understand that this here belief of me being taken care of by God, who favors me more than everybody else, as I believed, right, was inspired by the fact that my mom was largely negligent. She was one of those, like, God has often used the story of Matilda to describe how I was on the come up, largely ignored by those who ought have seen that they have a gifted kid. In other words, family just could not care less to notice that I was gifted in very many respects, but the world saw it. Just like with Matilda, that Roald Dahl book, you know how Matilda is a special kid. She is gifted, right? She's a prodigy, right? But her family just could not care to even notice. Like, if you've seen the movie Matilda, when she is still a baby, googling and gagaing, she spells using cereal, her name in kitchen sink water. And like the family, the mom, it's just like, Matilda, you're wasting food. And just like, you know, like throws it out while there's like all this chaos in the house. It's like, this is an infant. When did she learn A, B, C, D, E to Z enough to spell her own name? And yet she could spell her own name in some dirty kitchen water. Unable to see that until Matilda. And then even her going to school was a decision by Matilda. She walked one day to a schooling system and a teacher noticed her and realized that she was gifted. In the end of the movie, she ultimately gets adopted by her teacher, right? Life doesn't happen like that in real life. That's a fictional story. Likely she would have been stranded with her family until she broke out of that grain. But just an unappreciated kid growing up amidst the people where there is so much clamor and chaos around in the room, with them focusing on somebody else that they prefer, another human being that they're looking at, enough to disregard and comprehensively ignore even the clout or the comprehensive or the communication by other people as to the giftedness of this child. Like when teachers tell you as a mother that your child is gifted, when things happen that evidence that your child is gifted, and you just like don't even see it, like you don't see that your child is beautiful, that your child is gifted, like you know, what is this, academically, intellectually gifted, when you just for the life of you are so postpartum depression or ignorant and negligent as a mom that even when the world sings praises for your child in your ear, you ignore it. But yeah, when that is a thing, a lot of times children can get discouraged by the lack of recognition of their grandiosity or whatever by their parents, because kids are made to pedestal parents above society. So if you are not acknowledged in your own household, in your own backyard, it sometimes just does not matter when you get acknowledged by the teachers in the school, by anybody else that can look at you out there, by the world of praise singers. It just is like, it doesn't matter because mom doesn't care. Yet I was able, despite what I desire strongly to be my mother's grander recognition of how good I am and stuff, I was able to refocus my energies on the fact that the world around happens to think I'm special. So that must mean that God is working hard to cause me to ignore the ignoring of my person by my family. I believed very early on that the reason why I'm so liked by teachers, why I am so liked by peers, friends, why I am so pretty much okay out there in the world except at home, I imagine that was because God was trying to comfort me and tell me that don't mind that person, she's struggling with her issues. And don't let her bring you down. And I imagine that the reason why God was doing that was because he had some kind of special plan for me in the future. So I imagined that plan must be to make me somebody awesome, massive, great, wealthy, that I was never ever going to lose out on anything. I believed I was raised by God and not so much by family, because I imagined that God decided to adopt me literally from very early, I was thinking stuff like this, that he decided to adopt me early on, but because he's invisible, don't nobody see that I'm adopted by another being. So all the luck, really, luck ain't jack. It's not biblical, but at the time, that's what I called it, right? All the luck that I had in my life, I always knew that it was God. I always knew that it was God. So I maintained a Christianity, no, it wasn't a Christianity or even a Catholicism for that matter. It was just an irreligious huff of godliness. I used to pray before eating. I would do the Our Father before going to bed. I would, all that jazz. But I wasn't really saved, of course. I was still very lost. Because I felt like I needed to acknowledge this God that's obviously doing something for me. Like, duh, he has raised me. He took me to varsity. He's the one that's been paying my, funny things happened in my life, or miraculous things happened even before I came to Christ. I got given jobs that were lofty, requiring lots of experience and lots of education, just based on me being so liked at an interview that somebody would recommend that I do rather another job. Even if I had no credentials, even if I had no prior skill, the person was prepared to train me up. That's the level of luck I had. As a result, therefore, I skyrocketed up the corporate ladder very quickly once I pierced into corporate at all. I skyrocketed because I kept getting strange favors, even though it did not make sense. And that magnified my self-righteousness. Not only that, it also magnified my belief that I've been adopted by God. That I've been adopted by God. That I belong, that he likes me more than other people. Everybody else had to just go through these strenuous hurdles to get small little internships. But I was hopping leaps and bounds in ways that were then got observed by everybody around me who, like I said, in my family, I was largely ignored. And it became my family that wreaked a lot of handsome havoc in my life when they made an observation of the leaps and bounds that I was hopping, because according to them, I was gonna go nowhere. My prosperity did not puzzle many people from my vicinity, from my school or from high school varsity. It did not shock many people because like I said, teachers liked me. I would have been, if at all there was a vote done in high school, one of those most likely to end up ABC in a good capacity, okay? I was always just kind of respected by my peers. I wasn't academic in school, and I tended to be around other kids that were also academic because they clumped us in the same classes a lot of times, right? And so therefore, I was never ever looked at as somebody that's ever going to be a failure. It was kind of obvious to everyone around that pretty much all the kids in this class are going to be stars one day. I was in the clever class, if you know what I mean. Yeah. And it was well known, even in the school, that these kids are the ones with, the South Africa's mantle. They're the ones carrying South Africa in their bosom. It was kids in my class. Yeah, you get my point, y'all. Okay, they literally categorized us according to intelligence in my school. But really, was it really about intelligence? It could have been, but it also was about the subjects that we took. Certain kids tended to take certain subjects, and really bright kids were all about the maths and the science. So I was in the maths and the science classes and all that jazz. So I was never ever looked at as somebody that is highly unlikely going to succeed. Somebody that would ever shock anybody if they ended up running 3 organizations in the country, or even ending up, in parliament or whatever. It would never have shocked anybody because people in my class were bound to end up there, right? But what definitely would shock people, let's just put that out there, this is where it gets poignant, okay? What definitely would shock people is there being the exquisite level of failure in anyone in my class, in anyone in the kids in my particular batch of students at school. We were the most likely to do awesomely in this world. And it was not expected that any of us would end up essentially cleaning out toilets or waiting tables or whatever. All of us were inevitably gonna go somewhere sore like birds, and all of us did. Once we cracked out of high school, we all had stories to sing. And at some point, I was nicely communicating with a whole bunch of my classmates on Facebook when our careers were growing, because we inevitably were going to end up doing well. So it was no shock. But what is a shock is where I find myself while family and certain friends and certain acquaintances, people who were encircling my life, basically embracing, accepting that one of the girls that in school we were looking at as basically the next mayor of the city is waiting tables at Wimpy She is unemployed. She is ABC. She is Q, R, V, and T. That is not so good. Yeah, that is something that was not expected. And that would then cause people to look at me on some, what a waste, what a disappointment. We all thought you were going to be great. And you can imagine the level of sorrow that dwells in the heart of a person that essentially was supposed to be great, who also believed she was supposed to be great, had a self-righteousness, and imagine herself, nothing could ever touch her because she was MC Hammer. For somebody like that to end up with their feet, not their feet, sorry, but their teeth on the ground, with their nose squashed into the pavement, basically groveling, gathering dust, inhaling cement for air. When that human being is there, people are sometimes inclined to laugh at them until they gain understanding and context as to how that even happened. Which then brings me to exactly why it is that is the statement that I opened with here. Why do I listen to so much American gospel? Or the way that Americans interpret the gospel, because really the gospel is international. It's actually heavenly, and it's been handed down to the nations. Okay, I will explain to you why. Because this kind of bizarre trashing of human beings, it's just an epidemic in Africa. Let us continue to talk. Okay, I believed that I was never ever going to fail, and I believed that God was with me. Even though I had yet to give my life to Christ, right? I did not know him. And I was raised under certain doctrines that were full of heresy and holes in them. Okay. 26 and a half arrives. And I then finally make a decision to surrender to Jesus. I had, in the run-up to, been interrogating the things of God. I was investigating them. I was looking into it. I was sniffing around. I was dabbling, but I wasn't super serious. And at 26 and a half, somewhere along the way, I just made a total serious decision for Jesus. And that serious decision was hugely inspired by a fallout with the boyfriend that was holding me hostage with sorcery all those years. The pain, the severity of it that I felt literally ran me to Jesus. Since I was investigating the things of God on the run-up to, given that pain was so weird and I didn't understand where it was coming from, I then cried out to the God that I imagined was always around, and he was just looking out for me. I cried out to him finally in a state of surrender. I finally made a decision that, okay, fine, let me serve, help me. I literally cried. I was like, God, help me, because I was in so much pain. I was in the shower in the morning, getting ready for work. I had new cornrows, and with like afro hair underneath, so y'all know that stuff gets frizzy. I didn't care that shower water was falling on my fresh cornrows and causing therefore frizz, okay, because I was in that much pain. I could not stand straight in the shower. I had to sit down on the floor, and the shower water landed on my brand spanking new straight back hairstyle. It wasn't really straight back, but you get my point. Yeah. And because I was as exasperated, inebriated with sorrow as I was in that moment, I finally cried out to God. I was like, God, help me. I didn't say Jesus. I didn't say Holy Spirit. I did not know doctrine. I didn't understand that we are saved only way, truth, life by Jesus Christ. But I was interrogating the things of the God of the Bible. Okay, I was interrogating things of the God of the Bible. So when I cried out, God help me, the Lord understood that I meant the God of the Bible. It had to be, because I was looking into Christianity. I was convicted of sin in that regard. Okay, very well. Cool, so he saves me, right? That day I got born again. I just felt this infilling by the Holy Spirit. I was suddenly light on my feet. All that sorrow left me. I showered. I went to work. I was bouncing up and down. I was walking on sunshine. Okay, I was happy. I was so light on my feet. And that was the beginning of a journey. Now, here it is that I am a new regenerate. I'm a new convert to Christianity, living in a country that is just teeming at the folds with heresies and destructive doctrines of demons all over the show. The ecosystem within which I got evangelized, essentially seeds planted to get me to the point of interrogating Christ, was not at all the place to go to get discipleship. I was the first seed that was dropped like a gong in my heart. It was in a club, a party, where we were talking, like my ex and I were in and out, on and off. Our relationship was just rocky already, right? And I, at that season, was broken up with him. And I was therefore imaginative that a new man is coming into my life. Remember, I believed I was going to get married young, and then that dude wasted years of my life. So now I was not so young anymore. I was 25. I thought I would have gotten married at like picket fence and everything, 22, 23. I dated that ex of mine from 22, and 23 came and went. Anyway, whatever, you get my point, okay? Yeah, the picket fence did not come early. Like proper guys, well, if I tell you, I wanted to have pregnancy after pregnancy after pregnancy after pregnancy after pregnancy after pregnancy after, like, I was going to keep on popping babies. Do you understand? All the way throughout my 20s and early 30s, I was going to have a crash It was a plan I had since I was a child. It is therefore a gargantuan travesty that I'm 40 without children. That dream was built in me. It was given me by God from an early age. Hence why I believed I was going to marry young and just start having lots of children. I wanted a creche. I even said to God once that I wanted 7 kids, but if I got more, that would be awesome. My minimum was 7. That's what you must understand. For me to have no children at 39, yes, like it. But we're gonna get into the story further. All right, yeah. So I did not give my life early to Jesus. If I had, I probably would have gotten married on time and had all those babies. If I had heeded God's call on my life early, seeing as he likely was calling me the whole time, I always felt special, didn't I? However, the Lord did. He is sovereignty. The Lord is sovereign even over salvation. And so there is nothing that can ever happen that was not planned. God does not have a plan B. He just has a plan at all. Okay, very well. So even the date when I got born again was foreordained, but I personally wish I had gotten saved earlier. I do realize, however, that I didn't get saved earlier because I had to have gone through certain experiences in order that I might be healing to certain people, able to snatch some, even from the flames of hell, with a testimony that they can relate to. If I was one of those virgin brides, if I was one of those always in youth group kids, I would have had my audience to reach. Indeed, there would have been a niche that I could get to, but it wouldn't have been the niche that God intended to reach through me. So I had to basically just run these streets doing a strange thing, and then only at 26 and a half, early enough, right, to not have done too much damage to myself, but too late to be a virgin and all that jazz. But anyway, whatever, that was my redemption. The biggest regret I have was ever having sex at all outside of marriage. Like, it is literally by far the biggest regret I have. Okay, very well. So I got saved then. Not saved, I got the first seeds planted in me of gospel truth and Jesus and stuff, right? At a club. It was like at a party or whatever. It was a 21st birthday for a friend of ours, and music was just pumping, and I was newly broken up with my ex, and I was obviously in the market for a new man. And I asked, because I did not want to keep having sex, right? Sex has always just made me uncomfortable. Like, pretty much since breaking of the virginity, like, God has always been with me. That's what I'm getting at. Like, conviction of sin has been following me like a tail. Do you understand? And so for me, I didn't like the concept. That's why I believed I was going to get married early, of just adding to my body count, like a new guy, like 1 guy, 2 guys, 3 guys, 4. Like, I was just sick and tired. My ex-boyfriend was the 5th guy that I had slept with, and I just did not want number 6. I did not want number 7 and 8 and 12. I did not want to be like Samantha from Sex and the City. I just did not want to be a woman with a sexual proclivity, albeit having not really actually wanted that for myself. Okay, so I was very concerned about sex. I was, because I thought that I was going to get married to that dude. The 5-year guy. I thought he was going to end up my husband, and the fact that we kept on breaking up, and this year it looked like it was not going to improve this relationship. It looked like nothing was ever going to suffice that was sustainable for us, that I would now have to go and sleep with a new guy, right? I was in the world. I did not know Jesus, and celibacy was, of course, off the table, because I imagined you have to test the goods first before you get married. So I go to this party, and we start talking, and I'm like, goodness, guys, like, like, how long must a person wait in a relationship before they have sex? I was expecting this chick to give me some answer like Steve Harvey, 3 months or whatever, and then the guy is going like, act like a woman, think like a man proper. Like, that book is sold in Christian churches like it's a Christian book. I actually bought that book at Rhema bookstore, believe it or not. Anyway, whatever. Yeah, Steve Harvey recommends that you wait for 3 months. And I was waiting for this chick to basically tell, and I'd heard that before somewhere, from people that were ranting and raving about that movie, Act Like a Woman, Think Like a Man, in the world, when we were still in the world. Every black person in these streets was talking about that movie and how it was just so full of wisdom. Yes, but I didn't personally watch it. However, the counsel did filter down to me, where my girls were like, girl, you need to make a man wait for 3 months. 3 months! Yeah, and so I was like, okay, whatever, it doesn't matter, because I was in a relationship that was solid, so we were not about to, there was nothing that it didn't apply to me at the time, because I was in a relationship. So yeah, but now here it is that I'm newly saved, so not newly saved, but newly single. So I have got now to, I guess, wait for 3 months, right? I expected that this woman, this girl, this fellow, the high school, she was in my high school. However, she was not, we were not friends in school, just acquaintances. However, her friend was my friend from primary school, right? Type thing. And I'm there chilling with this chick from my high school. And we are now talking about relationships. It was not just the two of us, but like, you know, a crowd of girls. And I asked, like, how long must I wait? And I'm expecting this chick to roll out the advice from Steve Harvey's book. 3 months, because so many black women were just like eating it whole. And then she was like, marriage. Oh, goodness, like slapped me with a pan on my head, right? I'm this like fornicating beast that has no conviction of sexual sin, not too much conviction. Anyway, all I knew is that I didn't want to keep adding to my body count. All right, yeah. And then she tells me 3 months, and I'm like, oh, whoa, like you gotta test the goods. What are you talking about? And then she just goes into a whole sermon right there in the church, not in the church, in the club, in the party scene, about how it is that it's soul ties, and this is going to do this to you. You're gonna ask God for a husband, and then He's not gonna be able to give you one because of the fact that there's already like 4 husbands just chilling there, because that's what the devil recognizes, that's what God recognizes, and so He won't be able to act on your behalf. Basically just like a lot of heresy. However, enough freaking out was chilling in my heart at that heretical doctrine. Essentially, this girl was speaking about how it is that she said that I've got soul ties from having sex with all these guys that I had sex with. True story. That is a whole thing. You do form a bond with a person that is spiritual when you have sex with them. So when you have more than one person as a partner, it's problematic. It does cause a soul tie. However, it is entirely doctrinally erroneous to say that God cannot do anything for a person that goes to Him and asks for stuff. Like, God is in the heavens. He does whatever He pleases. He's sovereign. He's holy. He is perfect. He is powerful, omnipotent. Yeah, and she kept on saying that the devil could say to God, no, you can't give Karabo a husband because she's already got 4 in her body because of all of these soul ties. And all I could think about were all the guys I slept with. At that stage, it was 5, including my ex. And I was like, so I've got 5 husbands? My goodness. How do I destroy that? I asked this chick in the club, how do I destroy these 5 husbands in my body? I want to get rid of them. And then she was like, she could not give me proper counsel. She was not in any position to evangelize. And of herself, she didn't understand the gospel. She just told me, now go to a pastor. Maybe a pastor might help you. She just was not able to give me sufficient advice. So I was essentially left hanging. She planted a seed that landed like a gong in my heart. And I was lingering on her, holding on to her for dear life to explain to me how to get out of the prison of soul ties. And she just couldn't give me an answer. It is written in God's word that you must always be ready to give an answer for the hope you have in Jesus. Christians, your undiscipled nature is making you essentially anticlimaxes of people that are interested in what you have to say. You must make yourself an apologist for the kingdom of heaven. You need to study the Bible to show yourself approved, that when somebody asks you a question, you can answer them in a way that's going to cause them to linger, not only linger, but study further. You can't just leave people hanging, because you know what the parable of the sower says. Some people hear the gospel and then they are excited for 5 seconds and walk away. Others walk away because of persecution. Others take themselves rather into the adoration of the cares of this world too much to focus on Christ, and so they don't bear fruit. There's only one category of people that bear fruit 30-fold, 60-fold, 100-fold over. And it's those where the root of Christ is etched. And those guys, the only reason why the root of Christ would get etched is because faith came by hearing, and hearing by what? The word of God. The word of God, of which needs to sometimes come out of your mouth, seeing as a lot of people don't just walk around when they don't know Jesus with Bibles. And they also don't have a natural incentive within themselves to just crack one open when it's in their backyard. Because I had Bibles in the house, but I wasn't about to just crack one open, because for what? I was irreligious. I was unsaved. I didn't care. They were just there to gather dust and, be ornamental in the house. Yeah, so you're the Bible. Until such time that a person studies for themselves. That's what it is that we need to do. We need to care enough for souls to know the word and respond appropriately. And this chick could not give me answers, and she left me hanging, dangling like an octopus. And I just felt so uneasy. By the amazing grace of God, however, God, like I said, I've always felt special. Like, He really liked me a lot, God, in comparison to everybody else. He never let me go. He never let it go. That thing hung on me so heavy, just swinging on my heart like Sia on a chandelier. Yeah, it just hung. I could, when I got home that evening, seeing as I'd already stopped, thank God I stopped drinking alcohol something like 2 to 3 years before coming to Christ. So I tended to kind of retain knowledge after parties, where before you would wake up wondering, what did we talk about? Because you were all drunk. Yeah, well, I retained knowledge. I was sober at that joint. I was drinking a whole bunch of very expensive Red Bulls and some Coca-Cola. So basically, I was alert at night, laying in my bed with this thing just going in my brain. I wanted a husband. It was already late. Time was ticking. I'm 26 I'm 26. I was supposed to be married at 22. Dude did not propose marriage. I'm supposed to be on my 3rd or 4th pregnancy. And I cannot be having 4, 5 husbands in my body, because then the devil is going to prosper to make sure that God cannot give me a husband. That was that girl's doctrine, and I was running with it. So, naturally, because I worked for a company that gave us free data, we had these dongles, MTN, I didn't wait on my computer. Just plugged in my dongle right there in the middle of the night, and I was like, soul ties. Soul ties. I literally researched it the very same night when I went home, and I read a whole bunch of stuff until I got super tired, slept, and I kept reading about it. I kept reading about it so much that I then ended up bombarding people on Facebook with all of my curiosity about Jesus. I guess it made them annoyed. Yeah. Guys, what would you do if your boyfriend told you that they want to stop having sex, or your girlfriend? Would you hate them? Would you walk away from them? I started giving, my ex-boyfriend and I got back together, and after getting back together, I was like, I can't be having sex because I don't want to have sex before marriage. I essentially had conviction, severity of it, and when then I was reading about these soul ties online, I then got more information, and some of that information was evangelistic. It was Christ leading. It was telling me that I need to go to Jesus Christ. I need to ask the Lord to deliver me. I need to break out of these ridiculous soul ties through Christ. But I was 1 foot in the world, 1 foot out of the world. In Christ, right? I was interrogating, I was dabbling with Christianity, but I was not fully sold out. And I was not, yeah, you get my point. So I was very worldly. I was still partying, I was still clubbing, I was still doing all different kinds of weird stuff, attending strange events. I was not fornicating though, because I was withholding that from my boyfriend, and we ended up breaking up because of the fact that I ended up capitulating because we kept on sleeping in the same bed, type establishment thing. Anyway, whatever. No, we didn't live together though. Yeah, just to put that out there, it was not a cohabitation affair. Yeah, that's what's good. So with me researching the things of God, I started to then dabble. Since I was just dabbling at this point, I started to dabble with prayer. I started to dabble with, church. One girl picked, I was bombarding everybody with commentary on Facebook about this Christian curiosity, and one girl responded and she was like, I'll take you to church, and she actually picked me up with her husband and son on Sundays, like 4 consecutive Sundays in a row, and they drove me there. I had my own vehicle. I could have totally taken myself there, but this woman held me accountable and took me to church. But let's not give her too much praise, because she ended up being one of my biggest afflictors with sorcery. Okay, but she was happy to be what involved in my salvation experience, basically telling herself that, oh, I led somebody to Jesus. Anyway, yeah, so I started going to church because of that woman, and then somewhere along the way she stopped picking me up and I started taking myself. So I was going to church every Sunday, but I was in the club on the Saturday evening. However, because I don't drink, I wasn't high or babalast or whatever. The next morning, hungover, but I did feel a sense of hangover because I would be literally explaining here for 20,000 years if I were to explain my entire salvation testimony to you. But I ultimately was weaned off the nightclub scene by the fact that I felt inebriated with some kind of burden that was very deeply spiritual when I was in that space. It was dark. I could no longer take the club the way that I used to take the club in my stride. That's what I'm getting at. It felt dark. It felt licentious. It's almost like I could see shadow figures in that environment. Everybody was much too naked for my liking in that space. Everybody was much too sweaty. It was much too hot. It was much too licentious. The music was much too crass. Everything was just too evil. And so one day I just absconded from the club and didn't tell my friends, and I just never looked back. Yeah. I ultimately was ripped out of that environment because the Holy Spirit was convicting me of sin. But I was living a double life in the beginning. I was still in the world, but severely convicted that it gotta go. That the world gotta go. Okay, now that is a person that is being called out of the world. I had yet to fully surrender to God because I was still living a very carnal lifestyle. I only eventually surrendered when my ex and I broke up and we had a horrible fight, blah blah, all that jazz. It broke my heart and I was crying on the shower floor, and then I was like, God help me. Then I got born again. Then I got loosed from what he was holding me hostage with. The sorcery that kept making me go back to a man I knew I had to leave. I was broken free from it on that day. That's why I felt light on my feet, and that's why I was no longer fighting with him, because, oh goodness, whoa, we were fighting because of something else. It's not worth it for me to talk about it right now. It's another story for another day. We were fighting over some issue, and it ended really horribly, and he was very arrogant in a way that he had never been arrogant before, and it broke my heart to so many pieces, and I felt like I was just bound to something that doesn't want me anymore, that I also don't want anymore, and yet I feel bound to it. And when I cried out to God, saying, God help me, it broke loose. And I was no longer angry with my ex. I was no longer upset. Like, all that bitterness and angst was just gone. I was set free from his witchcraft immediately at redemption. Immediately at redemption. It did not take deliverance ministers to get demons out of me. It did not take years of praying to loose me from the clutch of an evil man. It was just my born again experience. The day of my salvation, boom, chains broke off and I was able to successfully get out of a horrible relationship and stay out and not feel broken and devastated by not being with him, because he was holding me hostage with Begamina Pela. He was holding me hostage with Begamina Pela, and it got loosed. It got broken off me. And so I no longer felt like I can't do without him, for crying out loud. Oh, sorry, those of you who don't understand what Begamina Pela is, it's a witchcraft spell. The name, the Begamina Pela, is Zulu for look at me only. It's Zulu for look at me only. So it was a look at me only witchcraft spell. Like, you will go nowhere. You are mine. You are mine sorcery. Yeah, that's what that was. I was loosed from it that day. That very fateful day when I got born again, I was loosed immediately. And this here is going to lend over to the point I am trying to make in this particular video, right? Once I was redeemed, it would take now months from that date of sanctification. Sanctification is the cleansing of oneself from filthy habits. Of course, the Lord got me out the club, you know what I mean? And all that jazz. But of course, you are not going to be truly and entirely sanctified apart from understanding what it is that God expects of you. Sanctification is inspired by knowledge of what God expects of you. His word, in other words, the commandments, if you want to call it that. His precepts, what he wants of you to look like. You are building your house on the rock. Meaning that the commandments of God matter. By this, men will know that you're my disciples. Obey my commandments. If you build your house on the sand, you are one who reads the Bible. One ear it goes in, out the other it leaves. It departs, right? So on that day, the winds and the waves are just going to beat you down, and you will also be tossed to and from by every wind of doctrine. So I was not being built on the rock, all right? The Lord was establishing me on the rock. He was putting me on the rock. I was his new convert, and so he had no interest that I should be getting, trained up, taught in godliness in the wrong space. The Lord did not want me. Look, I understand that there are people who go through the world, who get born again, and they stick around in unbiblical churches for literally much too long. And for me, it's like I feel as if though those people stick around there because they're on spiritual milk, but I also feel as if though they stick around there because they're stubborn. A lot of times people leech themselves to a brick and mortar church and feel like this is it. This is where I got born again. This is where I got evangelized. This is the first church I ever went to, and I like it. I love the whatever. I love the music. Like at Rhema, I was big on music. Their church, they praise and worship. Praise and worship is not actually music, but you get my point. That segment, it used to just reel me in. So I used to love that environment. Like I could just chill in that space. I loved the music, right? I am musically charged as a person. I've got musical gifts too. So for those reasons, it was easy for me to just fall in love with that church. But a lot of Christians, when they are newly converted, often start out at a church, and they tend to have chosen that church for a purpose, a reason, something that drew them to that space. And then they develop attachments to human beings. They develop attachments to brick and mortar structures. They develop attachments to essentially an environment that, despite conviction of certain things just being awry in that space, sticking around in it. Like I knew this one girl, but she wasn't saved anyway, right? She's the same one that took me to church with her husband. She told me when I moved, because I was busy playing musical chairs between churches because I had solid conviction that I was in the wrong place. When I moved to Grace Bible Church in Soweto, because I was looking for a sounder church, she was like, oh, I can't really be at Grace because, it's for me, it's about the layout. They've got these like tent meeting chairs that they have to lay, and they're not comfortable. At Rhema, it was a mega church that was a lot more financially well off, and it had an auditorium type church structure, and so the chairs were those that you could recline. They're cushy, they're like your couch at home. And at Grace, it was plastic chairs that every Sunday, so basically Saturday evening, somebody had to put the chairs down next to each other for church service on Sunday, and then pack them again after the service is over. That's how it was at Grace, right? And this chick was lamenting about that. She didn't want to sit on plastic chairs like she's attending a cheap wedding, and they couldn't afford to get like proper decor or whatever. And I could not believe her response. Like, for the life of me, I could not believe it. But a lot of times people choose churches based on stupid stuff like that. Like, I don't want to sit on plastic chairs, or I like the praise and worship, or I like just the acoustics of this environment, how the voices of the pastors just can bounce off the walls, given that they built it in order for it to have a cathedral feel, and they stick around. Or there are people they like, or there is a Bible study, that a group of people that are affiliated to this particular church that they have gotten accustomed to attending every Wednesday, and so they just stick around. They have a body of brethren with whom they're happy to basically just keep on fellowshipping, despite a severity of conviction that what is being taught at the pulpit, I'm not comfortable with it. I'm not comfortable with it. At Grace, when I moved over to Grace, there were like, I was in the children's church ministry of helps, so Sunday school. There were a few, not just one. It was not just me or even one dude or one chick. A few of the people in the children's church ministry that were just grieved by doctrines at the pulpit, but they were sitting around because this is the church they were raised in. This is the church that they knew, the home cell Bible study that they knew. They had gotten so adoring and affiliated to this brick and mortar structure that they could not leave, even though their ears were bursting every Sunday. I couldn't understand it, men and women. And for me, it was like, but then why don't you leave? There was this one group of guys that belonged to the Sunday school ministry that said that we're staying because we hope to change and transform the church from the inside. I could understand their viewpoint, but everybody else, it's like, girl, this is your soul. This is your growth. And this is the environment. You're a single woman where you're going to meet a man. Are you serious? Why in the world would you want to marry a man chilling in this church that listens to that preaching and is not grieved? How is he going to lead you in godliness when you're grieved by that preaching? If he's not grieved, he's spiritually immature in comparison to you. You gotta leave, that you might basically improve your chances of marrying a man that's going to be a substantial spiritual leader in your household, enough to subdue you, who is very godly as a woman, under his headship. Like, you have got to marry a man that is easy to respect, woman. Like, that's what I'm getting at. So why are you chilling in a church that's got dudes sitting under Musa Sono's preaching and just kind of basking in it every Sunday, saying hallelujah, amen, when you're uncomfortable? Like, what's up with that? What's up with that? That's the kind of stuff that I happened upon at Grace. I ended up leaving a type establishment thing, but a lot of Christians, I do believe, stick around in churches that speak nonsense or that preach fluff at the pulpit, precisely because of such things that I've highlighted above. I, however, I heeded, I listened. I told you that I've always had a thing about God since I was a kid, to a point where I believe that he looks upon me with greater favor than everybody else. And I'm getting to that, right? I'm getting to that particular self-righteousness, or that belief of basically a delusion of grandeur. It wasn't a delusion, all right? Yeah, the Chiquita, sorry, once I got born again, right, I became thirsty effervescently. Like, I was just feverishly hungry for God. Indeed, the Bible did make it clear that that's a thing. Blessed are they who what? Hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be what? Fed. So I was reading lots of literature, but remember, I am in a church. I got evangelized, first of all, in a club by a person that couldn't even understand, that couldn't even explain to me what I needed to hear. I then had to go and Google stuff myself. My curiosity led me to write a whole bunch of posts on YouTube, on Facebook, that got me taken to church every Sunday, until I eventually started taking myself. I divorced myself from the club. My ex and I ended up breaking up. We ended up breaking up. I then was now officially a Christian. I was going to church and everything every Sunday. I was going to Bible studies during the week. I was so hungry and I was so thirsty for Jesus Christ that it was not enough for me to just be hanging out on Sundays in services and then that's it. And initially I was very extremely edified by what was being preached at the pulpit. Initially I loved every sermon that came from these seeker-sensitive churches. But remember, I was hungry and I was thirsty, and Sunday was not enough. So I very quickly searched out a home cell Bible study group for myself, wrote my name on some form and whatnot, got contacted by a dude that runs a home cell study Bible group and was like, Karabo, you want to belong to a home cell? There is one near your hood there in Remzig. There was a man's house that we used to travel to. to go and do Bible studies, and he was actually quite good, and largely it was young people that were there, and he was just like a father, a bit of a shepherd over them type establishment thing. He called me, so I joined the home cell Bible study on Wednesdays, but that was not enough. It was on Tuesday actually that one was the one from the other church was on a Wednesday. So yeah, Tuesday, here it is, I'm at the home cell Bible study during the week, but it wasn't enough. I was so thirsty and I was so hungry for Jesus that I did my own research. After all, I worked for a company that gave us free data, and so at home I could stream videos on YouTube, I could watch anything, I could read anything on the internet at a whim. I just was able to basically, conjure up information as I desired from the World Wide Web. And so if at all I was not at work, if I was not doing anything, if I was not busy crunching work, I was crunching the gospel, even at work. That's how much I was curious about God. Like, on my lunch break, I would be reading articles online. Sometimes even in between meetings, I would be reading stuff about God online. And when I was home, I would be reading stuff. It went from reading articles online about salvation, soul ties. I initially got very interested in the whole soul tie discussion because I wanted to be broken free from this thing that's making sure I can't get married type thing, right? And so the whole soul tie search led me to a lot of sermons on sexual immorality, and I first started reading a lot of articles on the internet, and then I graduated over to watching videos on YouTube. And when I was watching videos on YouTube on sexual immorality type establishment thing, I then found a lot of young people's ministries, Passion for Christ movement, all that jazz. Much of what it is that was the direction that I was led towards to find stuff out for myself, because I was not getting it at church, was within the American space. The P4CM movement, I found it very encouraging, very inspiring, because of the fact that they were very bold in their testimonies and their witness. They did not censor anything, and largely it was a purity movement. It was a purity movement. It was a sexual purity movement, and I fell in love with it. And so I fell in love with gospel poetry and gospel rap and all that jazz through P4CM type thing. And then more people were introduced to me later on through P4CM, right? That's what's good. Yeah, so that helped out a whole bunch. But then what ended up happening is that one day, because I was so curious about God, right, I was so besotted, and I was just studying and studying and studying and studying like no man's business, reading up stuff. I was going to anything I could go to. I not only went to church on on Sundays in the morning, I would go to evening services too, and I found the evening services were a lot more sound. So essentially, the pastors that are being tested to be pastors, that were on the come up, that were being raised up to be the lead pastors of the future, were more sound than Ray McCauley. I'm just putting that out there. His own son, Joshua, or whatever, was far better. I don't know if that's still a thing, because I've moved away from the health, wealth, and prosperity movement and whatnot, like seeker-sensitive churches. I've moved on, type thing. But I like the story that I'm telling, I am panicking and freaking out right now because I've already been speaking for an hour 12 minutes, and I really want to move on to a next part, but I wanted to seal this one nicely roundly. But I'm not going to be comfortable to speak my mind as fully as I want to speak my mind when I'm busy looking at a ticking metronome. So let's move to the next part, guys, and we're just going to carry on from where it is that I left off. I'm sorry to have to leave you hanging in this part, but please follow me in part 2.